Good morning and welcome to another edition of the OBX Wave Report, this edition for January the 24th. And at the OBX Wave Report, as you know, we discuss all things waves, weather, climate, and beach lifestyle. And for this daily report, we are going to go deep. What I mean by go deep is like kind of in the duck dive sense, we're going to do a double duck dive kind of analysis into the weather trends that are affecting the Outer Banks for the winter of 2022/2023 as we in the Outer Banks here prepare for another bout of severe weather coming up from the Gulf and swooping down from the Arctic. And it is worth noting that for the winter of 2022-2023, we have seen a succession of frontal storms that have brought with it gale force conditions, particularly gale force winds coming in from the south and then whipping around to the west. These weather tendency has been punctuated by a bomb cyclone back in December that produced a very powerful gale for the Outer Banks and a strong swing in temperature from warm to cold. And then also on this past Sunday, another frontal system that produced a hurricane force gust at Jeanette's Pier that apparently very few people in the national media are talking about, which I find to be kind of interesting. I mean, there's a lot to talk about as far as weather and climate these days, but hurricane force gust out here on the Outer Banks, nothing to shake a stick at. So right now we are preparing for another one of these systems. We are seeing thunderstorms packing up over eastern Texas today, and you can see this in the NOAA GeoColor composite, which shows you this big bank of clouds out here over Texas. And you can see the Gulf moisture feeding into this stack of clouds. You can see the instability swooping in over the Rockies from the north. And you can kind of see a bit of a moisture flow, or at least a upper air cloud flow coming in off of the Pacific here, providing a little bit of fuel for these storms. And the ingredients for this system are the same that has been in place for the other systems that I mentioned. There are warmer than normal temperatures over the Gulf of Mexico, warmer than normal sea surface temperatures, warmer than normal sea surface temperatures in the North Atlantic, particularly near the East Coast and particularly off the Northeast. And we have a relatively consistent trough in the jet stream that dips down and brings cold air and little stormy impulses out from the Arctic as well to add to the instability. You get this clash between the cold air swooping down over the continent from the Arctic and the warmer than normal, moister than normal air over the Gulf and over the North Atlantic, and that provides some convective lift to the atmosphere, which helps to fuel these frontal systems that are coming in. It is worth noting that we've had a dearth of nor'easter type systems over the past 2 months. And in the forecast so far, at least looking at the through early February timeframe, it does look like the models are pointing to a continuation of frontal style systems as opposed to nor'easter style low pressure systems off the US East Coast. So this is a basic overview of the weather analysis that affects the Outer Banks for the winter of 2022-2023. It's a weather and climate analysis because we are including the fact that ocean water temperatures are much warmer than normal, and that has a climate fingerprint on it. All right, so for today though, right now for the Outer Banks, we are experiencing clear conditions with northwesterly breezes coming in at around 10 miles per hour for most of the Outer Banks. Most of the Outer Banks right now are experiencing 1 to 2 foot waves, with some locations just seeing 1 foot waves. and other locations seeing 1 to 2 foot waves. I believe the tallest wave spot on the Outer Banks is seeing consistent 2 foot waves. Overall, rather small, but with some locations still featuring rideable waves on the Outer Banks. This as gale watches are again coming up ahead of the next system, which is expected to sweep in by late Wednesday and into early Thursday, bringing gale force conditions likely to the Outer Banks on Wednesday and into Thursday night, and with the potential for severe weather. It is worth noting that with the present system, there is a potential for severe weather running along the Gulf Coast states today and into early tomorrow, and then running on up the southeast coast into Wednesday and Thursday. And we are going to provide you guys with a little bit of a severe weather analysis provided by the Storm Prediction Center. So we're going to meta-analyze the analysis by the Storm Prediction Center. We're not going to get too far into the weeds, but I did want to show you that we have some severe thunderstorm potential for the US Southeast that could kick up some severe events, including tornadoes, hail, strong straight line winds like what we experienced here in the Outer Banks on Sunday, and just generally severe thunderstorm conditions. I'll get into that a little bit more later. All right, so looking at the satellite shot, the infrared satellite shot, we do see the area of stormy weather firing up over Texas here with these higher cloud tops in association with lines to this warmer than normal air mass over the Gulf of Mexico and over the Atlantic Ocean, providing it fuel, even as the instability sweeping in from the north provides that added swirl in the atmosphere necessary for supercells, large thunderstorms, and potentially cyclonic systems, meaning tornadic type systems, to develop along the frontal boundary. The low pressure system that is helping to fuel this frontal storm is right now anchored over Texas. You can see it in the swirl, and it is expected to sweep on in kind of this fashion up toward the Great Lakes region, dragging the front along behind it, even as it then is expected to move off the US Northeast coast and on into the Canadian Maritimes and into Baffin Bay area. All right, so let's get down into the nitty gritty here as we look at the National Weather Service radar picture. And I just did want to show you like all the alerts and notifications up in association with the system. We've got coastal alerts for the Gulf Coast region. We've got this big mass of storms firing off over Texas. We've got some winter weather advisories and a band here from North Texas sweeping on through to the upper Ohio River Valley and south of the Great Lakes region. And we've got all these various other alerts out ahead of the system. Here in the Outer Banks, we've got gale watches. And if you look on the coast, in fact, most of the East Coast right now in the near offshore environment is under a gale watch ahead of this most recent frontal system expected to sweep in. For us here in Manio and off of the Nag's Head, Kill Devil Hills, and Kitty Hawk region, we've got a gale watch up. We've got a gale watch, and this would be in the Body Island area. We've got gale watches up on the east side of Hatteras Island and on the south side of Hatteras Island as well. And then as we head on down to Ocracoke and the near Morehead City area in the offshore environment, we've got gale watches as well. Gale watches running from central, looks like South Carolina here, on up to, wow, looks like the Boston, just the near offshore region of Boston. So hundreds of miles of gale watches for the US East Coast and the near offshore environment ahead of this frontal system. All right, so let's get down into the NOAA quantitative prediction forecast to see what the trends are. And as we've seen during recent days and weeks, there has been a trend for a trough to develop. and for stormy conditions to predominate over the US East. This has been particularly the case over the past week, and we see it in the NOAA quantitative prediction analysis for the next 7 days, where severe weather and stormy weather and heavier precipitation is expected for the U.S. Southeast running on into the U.S. East Coast and the Ohio River Valley. It's worth noting that the U.S. West is relatively dry, particularly for the Southwest, with California continuing to see a break from the stormy conditions that dominated it from mid-December on into mid-January. Okay, so that's enough talk about weather and climate for now. I'm going to go down to some local spots and talk about the waves for today, as we do every day for the OBX wave report. And then we're going to go back out and start talking about weather, because we are expecting a gale to run in through the Outer Banks late tomorrow, potentially with some severe weather. We're expecting the waves to kick up again, running from Wednesday into Thursday. So we're likely to see some taller waves again for the Outer Banks as another system sweeps on through. But right now we have relatively calm conditions, and starting out at Jeanette's Pier, right now the waves are in the range of 1 to 2 foot with a primary swell with those probably about 1.8 foot waves coming in at 6 seconds and a secondary swell at 8 seconds. Winds are out of the northwest at 10 miles per hour, which is an offshore flow. Air temperatures in the range of the lower 40s right now, about around 42 to 43 degrees, and ocean water temperatures dipping into rather cold at 49 degrees Fahrenheit. So you're going to need your full suits, your hoodies, your booties, your gloves, all the things to keep warm down there at Jeanette's Pier if you do decide to go surfing today. Weather conditions for today are expected to be sunny with a northwest breeze. The expected high today at Jeanette's Pier is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Moving on down the coast, we find 1 to 2 foot waves pretty much dominating for most of the beaches. Getting past Oregon Inlet, this is the case with Road Anthony and Waves and Avon, and even down into Buxton here, which is typically the big wave spot. We've got 1 to 2 foot waves as well. So looking at Buxton, we've got 1 to 2 foot waves with a primary swell coming in at 8 seconds and a secondary swell coming in at 7 seconds. Winds are also out of the northwest, which is an offshore flow at 10 miles per hour. Air temperatures at Buxton also pretty cool at 44 degrees Fahrenheit. And those ocean water temperatures dipping down into the upper 50s at Buxton at 59 degrees Fahrenheit. This has been the case over the past couple of days. We're getting to the coldest water conditions of the year as we get into late January and into early February. So please make sure you've got your cold weather protection up, even if you decide to go to the more southerly beaches. Weather conditions for the day are sunny, expected to remain sunny throughout the day, with perhaps some high clouds moving in later on into the day ahead of that frontal system. Northwest winds coming in at 10 miles per hour. This is expected to continue as well, with a high today predicted of 50 degrees Fahrenheit for Buxton on the east side of Hatteras Island Village area. Now moving into the south-facing beaches. I did want to give you guys a sample of a south-facing beach, and we're going to go down to Billy Mitchell, which is just east of Frisco. And right now the waves at Billy Mitchell are 2 feet, which I guess is the big wave spot for the Outer Banks today, although it might be Ocracoke. I haven't really looked at Ocracoke. If you guys see some bigger waves down there at Ocracoke, go ahead and add some information for me in the comments. But right now, looks like Billy Mitchell, at least to me, is the big wave spot today on the Outer Banks with 2 foot waves, and a primary swell coming in with those 2 foot waves at 7 seconds, secondary swell at 8 seconds. And we're going to take a little break to drink some yummy green juice that Kat just dropped off. We'll drink a cheers to Kat for helping me out with some yummy green juice. Thank you, sweetie. And okay, yeah, so the secondary swell coming in at 8 seconds, primary swell coming in at 7 seconds. And the winds right now for Billy Mitchell are out of the northwest at 10 miles per hour. Worth noting that these northwest winds are all offshore, so everyone's experiencing offshore winds both in the east-facing beaches and in the south-facing beaches. The air temperature right now at Billy Mitchell is a chilly 44 degrees Fahrenheit, but with ocean water temperatures getting up into the 60-degree range, right at the 60-degree range, the only 60-degree reading that I have found in my assessments from the monitors, you're going to need your cold weather gear wherever you go on the Outer Banks today. 60-degree water temperatures with 40-degree air temperatures is not pleasant, so you're definitely going to want to have your hoodies, your booties, and your full suits likely. I don't know. Some of you might want to take your hood off in those conditions down there at Billy Mitchell. I don't know if I would. I want to have my head covered. In any case, weather conditions today at Billy Mitchell are expected to be sunny with a northwest breeze and the expected high today at 51. As we get into the day on Wednesday, we expect the conditions to change with winds picking up from the south, swell picking up from the south and southeast over the day on Wednesday, particularly as we get later into the day, and a potential for severe weather later in the day. And given that we had a hurricane force gust at Jeanette's Pier on Sunday, I've got a weather eye out for the wind speeds as well, and we'll report on the wind speeds. We'll see if we get a powerful gust front like we experienced on Sunday or something else, although it just does look like there is a serious severe weather potential with a gale watch up at the very least and likely gale conditions at the very least for the near offshore waters, if not for some of the beaches as well. All right, so let's get into our nerdy weather analysis. We're going to put on our weather nerd hats and get into the details here. Let's start out with pressures. All right. So um, this is the Earth Null School Monitor. It is a global forecast system model. I've got it set for right now, but we might change our location in time you on the global forecast system model as the model projects out into the future. Weather models are a little bit of a time machine, but they're not perfectly accurate. So if we talk about predictions, they're not 100% accurate, but they do give you a good idea of what may occur and what may be likely to occur. And so here we have a high pressure system right now over the US East Coast. This is showing the pressure gradients right now in the various regions. So we've got a high pressure system over the US East. We've got this blocking high pressure system out west, which is warding storms off the US West Coast. These storms are moving on up into Alaska, and then they kind of become impulses in Canada and run back down the jet stream here into the northern portion of the US. That's been the tendency. What has also been the tendency is we have these storms forming near the Gulf region and then sweeping on toward the East Coast as you get a combined push of cold air coming in from the Arctic and warm, moist air coming in from the south. And I'm just going to go ahead and run this model. As you can see, the storms start to develop here over the Gulf region and the Mississippi Valley, and then run up toward the Great Lakes with a low pressure system as a frontal system forms over the US East Coast into Wednesday and then Thursday. It is worth noting that the high pressure system that is warding storms off the US East Coast remains in place, as does the high pressure system that is off of Western Europe, pushing storms on up into Greenland and into the Arctic on the side of Iceland and Svalbard and Western Siberia. Okay, so let's get back to some other models. I did want to show you some features. I've been talking about the tendency for these frontal storms to form and what's feeding this, what's fueling this. It appears that there's a combination. We've got a weather pattern in which cold air comes sweeping down in punches from the Arctic. We have warmer than normal ocean water temperatures, and let's go ahead and get down into our ocean model and look at sea surface temperature anomalies. And we're going to go ahead and put the currents model up because it makes it easier to see the sea surface temperature anomalies. So what's happening is we have a combination here. We have cold air coming in from the Arctic, right now enhanced by the blocking high, because you get the front side of the blocking high and you tend to get these dips in the jet stream on the front side of the blocking high. We have got that blocking high out there over the west. It's helping to create this dip in the jet stream here. And then that dip, those colder, more unstable airs coming in from the north encounter this. And let's look at this. We've got ocean water temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico right now ranging from, let's get to the Fahrenheit level. 6 degrees Fahrenheit above normal near the coastal region of Florida, Mississippi, and Alabama. And for most of the Gulf of Mexico, sea surface temperatures ranging from 2 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. That's punching up a lot more moisture than is typical for this region. And so as these frontal systems swoop down, they encounter this convective lift, and the convective lift can help to fuel powerful storms. In addition, off the U.S. East Coast, we've got a similar situation. Sea surface temperatures off the southeast coast are in the range of about 1/2 degrees Fahrenheit to upwards of 5 degrees Fahrenheit above normal, and with about an average of around 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. These warmer than normal sea surface temperatures are also providing more moisture, more convective lift to the atmosphere. And then here off the U.S. East Coast, we've got much warmer than normal sea surface temperatures in the range of 16 degrees Fahrenheit above normal in the hot spots, and then getting to around 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. We do have some cooler spots where temperatures beat the trend and go negative, but for the most part, you've got much warmer than normal sea surface temperature mass out here off the US East Coast. And what that means is more water vapor, more moisture, more heat, more convective lift. And as these air masses come into clash, you can get these powerful frontal systems. Now, as far as nor'easters, why aren't nor'easters happening? I'm not too certain as to what the reasoning is for that. Maybe the warmer than normal air mass here and the way the jet stream is coming down has just tended to speed storms off into the North Atlantic, and that's been the tendency. Whereas nor'easters tend to be more coastal storms that tend to develop like off the coast as opposed to overland. That's the other feature. The storm centers are tending to develop overland, which would tend to enhance like a frontal type system, whereas for a nor'easter, storms would tend to develop low pressure centers out here in the Gulf that track on over Florida and off the US East Coast, or off the US East Coast that linger for a little bit and then track on off to the north. We haven't seen that. I don't know the exact reasoning for that, but the tendency has been for overland storms rather than over ocean storms. And the overland storms have been developing and pulling in these big old frontal boundaries, which is one of the reasons why we've had winds coming out of the south and southwest ahead of these storms and then whipping around to the northwest, as opposed to getting a nor'easter type system where the storms are developing offshore. Typically with the offshore storms, you would need maybe a little bit more of a dip in the jet stream moving down further to the south. And we haven't quite seen that this year. And you might need a little bit more of a blocking high out here in the central North Atlantic. And we have seen some high pressure systems tending to develop out here, but maybe not as frequently as is typical. I haven't been a major analyst when it comes to the development of nor'easter style systems. This is just my analysis of what's occurred over the past couple of months. All right, so let's see. Let's look at air. And I do want to show you the wind models right now for the system that is developing. And let's just go ahead and advance this model so you can see it start to come together. So you see the swirls start to come together over the Mississippi as the front starts to form over the Gulf, tapping into that warmer than normal Gulf air and Gulf moisture, likely developing a strong line of thunderstorms that sweeps in through the Gulf states. I'm going to talk about some of the potential severity of those storms in a minute. The front then starts to drape across the US East Coast, And you can see the front with the winds coming in from the west and northwest here, and the line of demarcation roughly indicated by the southerly wind flow sweeping up ahead of the front. So you can kind of see the front right here on the wind map where the lines converge. And I'll go ahead and zoom in. And so you can see this convergence of the wind lines right here, sweeping across the US East Coast on Wednesday. And this is when we're expected to see the near gale force to gale force winds coming in off the Atlantic Ocean later on Wednesday. It's worth noting we had a similar prediction for the last storm system. The winds got a lot stronger than what was predicted in the global forecast system model, particularly here in the Nags Head Manio region where we got a hurricane force gust. So it's just worth noting that maybe we can take these wind predictions with a grain of salt. Nonetheless, there is a potential for severe weather as we get into the late Wednesday, early Thursday hours. All right, I'm going to talk about waves in a little bit. I know this is supposed to be a wave report, but what drives waves is weather. And let's talk about some severe weather. Now, we did talk about this recent frontal system that is tapping into the Gulf moisture along with a storm that's developing over Texas and is expected to sweep north and eastward. Let's look at the current convective outlooks provided by the Storm Prediction Center. And I'm going to start out with the thunderstorm outlooks just to show you where the thunderstorms are firing right now, and they're expected to fire over the next few hours. So we've got a line of thunderstorms here in East Texas that is tracking on into Louisiana with a high potential for severe thunderstorms into Louisiana over the next few hours. These storms are expected to sweep eastward over the day, get into the Florida Panhandle, and then possibly reform over the U.S. East Coast tomorrow and affect the Outer Banks. Looking at the severe weather potential outlook and convective outlook, there is an enhanced chance of severe thunderstorms, which includes supercells, tornadoes, hail events, and powerful straight line wind events for the US Gulf Coast, with chances of these events tapering as we head more and more inland. Mainly the interaction with that warmer than normal Gulf water and the cool Arctic air sweeping down from the north, along with a roll in the atmosphere, is providing this potential. And so we've got a chance of some tornadoes firing up today and tomorrow as these severe thunderstorms sweep on in through the Gulf. All right, now looking on in through the day on Wednesday and Thursday at the 2-day outlook, it is worth noting that there is a chance of severe storms from the northern Florida region, from southeast Georgia through southeast South Carolina into North Carolina, extreme sections of southeast Virginia. This includes the Outer Banks. And the severe weather potential includes the potential for strong thunderstorms to sweep in. And it says according to the convective outlook, there's a slight risk of severe thunderstorms into Wednesday evening across parts of southeastern Alabama, northern Florida, southern and central Georgia, central and eastern North Carolina, and southeastern Virginia. There's a risk for damaging winds and a few tornadoes that will accompany showers and thunderstorms overspreading much of the southern Atlantic coast states Wednesday into Wednesday evening. And this as the frontal system taps into that Gulf moisture and the warmer than normal air mass over the North Atlantic, that moisture as well. Right now, the convective potential is slight for very severe storms, but it is something that we should keep a weather eye to, given the conditions that are present with this storm as it comes together. Now, I do want to look at the global forecast system model and show you the tendency for these storms to develop into powerful frontal systems. And this is very evident in the global forecast system model over the next couple of weeks. And I'm just going to go ahead and run this model here frame by frame as we watch the storm system develop over Louisiana and track on to the north and east, dragging behind it a frontal boundary that includes some severe storms for the US East and then for the Outer Banks by late Wednesday and into Thursday. And then the system sweeps on pretty rapidly off the US East Coast as another impulse runs in through the Great Lakes. So that there you got that, you have those cold there you have those cold storms sweeping down from Canada. And then by Sunday, we've got another low pressure system forming along the Gulf Coast region, along with some severe weather that tracks into Florida. This one getting a little bit more of a coastal component with a low pressure system that does develop off the US East Coast, but one that tracks off to the east pretty rapidly. And this system might dive a bit to the south of the Outer Banks as it goes offshore, so we might get more of an easterly wind component with that one. If it does line up, this one running from Sunday through Tuesday of next week. And then we've got a frontal system lingering over the Gulf and refiring off the US East Coast with a low pressure system developing in the offshore environment again, and then tracking off to the north and east. This looks almost like a more traditional nor'easter arrangement, although the storm moves pretty fast as it heads on offshore. And then another storm developing over parts of the eastern Rockies and then dipping down into Texas, grabbing that Gulf moisture again, and then firing up some really severe weather in this system by Friday, not of this week, but of next week. And we're getting pretty far out in the miles here, so we can take this with a grain of salt. But this is like a really big storm system as far as rain and snow goes. Nothing crazy as far as low pressure systems, but just very large frontal system with a lot of severe weather associated with it. Although the low does get some intensity to it later on as it moves in through the northeast. And this as we get into the day on Friday, February the 3rd, as the front sweeps on offshore. And then some cold air comes in behind it with a high pressure system. We still have that moisture lingering over the Gulf that swells again into another storm system that fires up over the Gulf, forming another kind of frontal storm that sweeps in across the US East Coast, with a low riding up the East Coast. And again, this, I'd said that, these had tended to look more like frontal system with this low here positioned along the coast. This again looks a little bit like more like a nor'easter event. So maybe we'll start to get some more nor'easter type events as we get on into February. Nonetheless, the overall trend for the US East Coast and for the Outer Banks is pretty stormy in this model. So I did want to note that. We got pretty deep into the analysis today. I did want to nerd out a bit on weather, but I will talk waves now. With so many storms developing, it looks like here in the Outer Banks, what we are in for, at least if these models hold true, is periods of stormy weather and higher surf punctuated by periods or actually no interspersed by periods of calm. And I think that that's what we're looking at according to the models and according to these weather analysis for the next 2 weeks coming up for the Outer Banks. So generally a stormy trend interspersed by periods of calm. And we're likely to see spikes in wave heights as the storms roll through. And then the days to go surfing will, of course, be the best days to go surfing will be the days right after the storm or in the wake of the storm, immediately following the storm as the calmer conditions roll in. For surfers, this does mean that it's going to be pretty eventful for late January and early into February. And as the storms roll through, we're likely to see wave heights popping up in the 5 to 7 foot range, and then as they leave, rapidly falling down, but providing us with the opportunity for some good surf conditions in the wake of those storms. From a climate and weather standpoint, this is interesting because of the features of the very warm Gulf of Mexico waters and the very warm North Atlantic waters. Just from like a risk standpoint, like from a climate risk standpoint, I've done a lot of risk work in the past with climate. Um, the higher levels of moisture combining with these storms coming in from the north, adding in the instability, does make me want to look at these storms for the potential for more severe weather, particularly for the U.S. Gulf and U.S. East Coast Southeast Coast in the form of thunderstorms, and then also for the U.S. Northeast in the form of severe snowfall as these storms just fire up and tap into that moisture. We haven't seen anything really crazy coming up in the models as far as big bomb storms like what we saw in December. So if that does happen, if we start to see a potential for that, we'll go ahead and highlight that, but we haven't seen that yet. although there does seem to be some potential for some severe weather even without big bomb type low pressure systems forming along these systems that are firing off. All right, so let's look at some waves and some wave forecasts. This is the OBX wave report after all. And looking at the near offshore environment for the Outer Banks right now, we've got swells in the range of 2 to 4 feet. That's clearly not translating to the coast as we've got 1 to 2 foot waves at the coast. And then toward the south, we also have some swells coming in from the south, running into the north, a little bit of a remnant swell here. And that's producing about a 2 foot breakdown there at Billy Mitchell. In the near offshore environment, it's 2 to 3 feet. And as we head into the day on Wednesday, we start to get those southerly winds coming in and more of a southerly swell component, a little bit of confusion off the eastern and northern beaches, but the swell does tend to orient from the south in the 2 to 4 foot range. And then as we head into the day on Wednesday, we get more winds and the swell from the south kicks up to the 6 to 7 foot range off the south beaches and then into the 3 to 4 foot range off the north beaches. And then generally, as we get later into the day on Wednesday, swells kicking up off the south beaches in the range of 8 to 9 feet, and for the north beaches in the range of 6 to 7 feet, maybe 8 feet off of Buxton there. And then just generally increasing in height as we get into the evening with rather large waves in those gale force to near gale force conditions, waves in the range of 9 to 10 feet, or well, I guess if we go throughout the Outer Banks in the range of 7 to 10 feet. And then probably kicking up even a little bit more as we get more into the evening up. So kicking up into the 11 to 12 foot south and 7 to 8 foot north. So some rather large waves with that gale. Then the gale consolidates and begins to move offshore as we head on into Thursday. And you can see that shift coming as this front. You can see the front actually in the swell, like right there in that white band. That's basically where the front is, where the waves are the largest and the significant wave heights out in the shipping lanes in the range of 19 feet here off the Virginia coastline. All right. So let's look on off to other locations across the North Atlantic and the Pacific. And right now, we do have large waves out here in the North Atlantic and in the near offshore waters of Ireland, significant wave heights in the range of 8 to 9 feet. Near offshore waters for Portugal in the range of 5 to 7 feet. And I know those beaches get surfed pretty frequently in winter. The major event right now for the North Atlantic is out here south of Svalbard, east of Western Siberia, and north of Scandinavia with significant wave heights in the range of 27 feet out here. And we've got large waves, significant wave heights in the range of 10 feet running into the ice sheet, the sea ice off of the extreme North Atlantic here and getting into the Arctic Ocean. And I'll just go ahead and show you that this storm kind of peters out by tomorrow, but it's definitely kicking up some powerful waves today. All right, and then let's look at the US West Coast. Right now for California, we've got significant wave heights in the range of 8 to 12 feet for the central to northern beaches. And then as we get into the southwest facing beaches, you've got significant wave heights in the range of 1 to 2 feet, maybe 1 to 4 feet as you get further south closer to Baja. And then we got some strong storms out in the central Pacific, but not as strong as we've seen recently, although significant wave heights in the range of 26 feet out here south of the Aleutians is nothing to shake a stick out. All right, so that concludes our analysis, our climate, weather, and wave analysis, both for the Outer Banks, for the lower 48, and for the North Atlantic. We did do a little bit of a deep dive into some of the prevailing conditions that are helping to fuel the strong frontal systems that we have seen recently here in the Outer Banks and across the U.S. Southeast. It is worth noting that the U.S. Southeast is under the gun for potential severe weather today and tomorrow as thunderstorms fire along another storm system, sweep across the Gulf states today and then the U.S. Southeast tomorrow. We here in the Outer Banks will be keeping our eyes out for severe weather, and I will be providing you with severe weather reports along with wave reports as they emerge. But for today, in conclusion, we've got 1 to 2 foot waves, and these waves are expected to remain in about this range for the day, so rather small. And then with that southerly flow coming in tomorrow, wave heights are expected to pump up in the near offshore waters and along the coastline with swells coming in from the south. So thank you for joining me for the OBX Wave Report. And as I ask you guys every day, please remember to do everything you can to help accelerate the transition to clean energy and thereby defend our beautiful coastlines from the impacts of climate change driven by fossil fuel burning. The main push right now to defend our coastlines is to shift to clean energy. And after that, we can start to build in all of the wonderful sustainability features that are available to us through the wonders of human innovation, progress, learning, and enlightenment. And all of those things provide us with hope for defending our coastlines, for keeping our climate and weather systems stable, and for being good stewards of our natural world, which provides us with so much happiness, enjoyment, wealth, and life support. So thank you for joining me.